sidesteps for three, and that was very James Harden-esque. Anthony Edwards, that one was from way deep. Edwards attacking again. Towns had Bridges all over him, finds Anthony Edwards underneath, and one for Edwards. Towns wide open, set up by Edwards. Edwards took some contact. Another and one.
So last night, Judd, I actually had with the platform that I currently consume Timberwolves games on, I had the Suns broadcast feed. Yes. So as the Wolves were chipping away, they were down by 15 in the third quarter to a legit Suns team. This is one of the better teams in the NBA this year. They won all 8 games in the bubble last summer, and then they added Chris Paul, and now they've just become it's Chris Paul and Devin Booker, and they're just a really good team. And so they're down by 15 to a legit Suns team. Ant and Cat start going to work. They work their way to 40-point games. And this you wouldn't know, like the Suns broadcast crew, they love Anthony Edwards, and they were praising him. But as the Wolves were sort of making their way back, they would just, the lead was 9, and then it was 7, and then all of a sudden the Wolves tied it, and like they didn't get excited or anything. It was just like, and there's an and one. He gets the bucket, goes to the line. It's like the biggest play of the game, and it's like they're just super low-key casual because they're the Suns broadcast team. But you said Dave Benz had his Game 7 NBA Finals last night.
Dave Benz was very excited. Dave Benz more than made up for the lack of enthusiasm coming from the Suns announcing team. Yes, he was very excited. I think he ordinarily starts to get pretty excited if the Wolves get a deficit down to 6, and then it just crescendos from there.
I mean, listen, if you're Dave Benz took over broadcasting, like 7 or 8 years ago or something, whatever it was. And he has just been crawling through the desert looking for a bottle of water. He had the 1 year with Tom Thibodeau where they went to the playoffs. But you know what? Last night might as well have been a Game 7 for him and the Timberwolves. And I think it was the biggest win of the year. I think it was bigger than the Portland win they had last week, in part because most of the time they would just quit after being down by 15 points, and they would just let Chris Paul do what he's going to do, hit those little mid-range jumpers and stare at the bench and pound his chest. And it was like Karl Anthony Towns kind of lets that happen sometimes, and that's been a criticism of him. He's a wonderful player, but he just he can wilt a little bit. He's kind of a beta personality. Anthony Edwards is not. And there were some comparisons, and we referenced these just sort of before the draft, like, is this something to be worried about? But there were some Andrew Wiggins comparisons to Anthony Edwards going into the draft. Like, okay, he's kind of a volume scorer. Does he really care about defense? He might not love basketball. He has a little bit of an aloof personality. Is this just sort of Andrew Wiggins 2.0? He is the anti-Andrew Wiggins in almost every way. And I'll even say, I think he thinks that he's the best player on the court, regardless of who else is on the court with him. He can be on the court with Damian Lillard, and he can be on the court with Devin Booker and Chris Paul. And Anthony Edwards, in his own mind, thinks that he is the best player, and I love that, Judd.
So when it came out that the Wolves were probably going to take him, I think it was in an ESPN piece. There was a very lengthy, well-written piece about the fact that he at the time said, I love football more than basketball. And I don't know if he said that he wished that he was a football player, but there was definitely an insinuation that basketball was, at the very best, his second favorite sport, which brought the Wiggins comparisons, because we all knew in watching Andrew that he truly did not love basketball. But the issue there, and where this turns out to be very different, is Andrew really doesn't, in my opinion, love sports. He is a gifted athlete, but that doesn't mean he loves sports. In Edwards' case, we misread that in this sense. Anthony Edwards might love football more than basketball, but he loves to compete and he loves sports, and he plays the sport of basketball at times. And this is what I loved last night. And post All-Star break, the Wolves are 3-2. And a big reason why is Anthony Edwards was clearly told or came to the conclusion that I have to drive to the basket more.
Yes.
And now he's turned to, so he did that for a while, but he wasn't necessarily as aggressive, and he didn't finish plays, and now he is. And so he is, I do not think that he is at his best when he is trying to shoot threes. He's going to be good there, I think. And there are times where it's clearly, because the 3-point line is farther back than college, it's still new to him. But I think he is at his best easily when he is driving to the basket and he is getting fouled. And I loved the maturation last night that I thought was so important, Phil, was first half. First of all, gets incredibly hot on three-pointers. So, and you knew that this was coming. It became heat check time, right? Like, I'm going to go and jack up a bunch of threes. He started to miss them. But in the first half of that game, he did not go to the free throw line once. All right. And I don't know if Chris Finch reminded him at halftime or what, but in the second half, what did he do? He came out and he drove and he went to the free throw line, and there were the and ones that you're talking about. In short, and we discussed this on Monday, when it comes to Justin Jefferson, when it comes to Kirill Kaprizov, and when it comes to Ant, I think that we in this town are in great shape with young talent of likable personalities and people who have unbelievable skills. And any comparison that we might have made at one time between Wiggins and Ant, out the window. This is a different person. And the other thing too, and I mean, it's not his playing style, but Phil, he's 19 years old. Okay. The personality and the post-game quotes are off the charts. He acts like he's 25.
Yeah. He's a vocal leader. Like I love it. That's another difference between him and Andrew Wiggins, not to make this all about like him versus Andrew Wiggins, but he's just constantly the Energizer Bunny, vocal leader, encouraging teammates. When they were closing out a game a few games ago, can't remember if it was the Portland game or another game, and Ricky Rubio is at the free throw line. I think it was the Portland game, because they just like Portland's like the Undertaker. They just keep sitting up. Oh, they're down by 20. Oh no, they've cut it to 8. Like, that's Portland. And Ricky Rubio got fouled about 1 million times at the end of the game, and finally he hits the free throw to put him up by 4 with like 2 seconds left.
Yep.
And Ant Edwards comes up behind him and like slaps him on the back, and Rubio kind of turns around like, what? And Edwards is like, dude, you just won the game. This is great. I love that he seems to embrace being the number one guy on the team. Now, sometimes it can get him into trouble when he goes on those heat check sprees, like you said, where it's like, all right, dude, like, you're the number one guy, but just let's not shoot from the logo. He made a freaking 3 from the logo last night, like the edge of the half court logo. Yeah. And I think Cat. So Cat has never fully seemed comfortable as the number one guy. There's always been, he always comes off a little insecure, a little whiny sometimes, and I don't know. I sort of see why Jimmy Butler didn't love Cat's personality, but Cat's a wonderful player. And it's very obvious 5 or 6 years into his career that he just needs to be sort of the Pau Gasol to a Kobe. He's got sort of I was texting you this last night. He's got sort of a Lamar Odom personality a little bit, where he's wonderfully talented, could do anything. He's better than Lamar Odom, but he's not going to be like the guy who leads you to championship glory. He needs to slot in as like the second or third guy. I think it's just becoming a little bit more obvious. And Anthony Davis had a little bit of that too. Like, you got to go find your LeBron. Well, maybe Anthony Edwards can be that for Cat. And we're sort of seeing that manifest on the court right now, that Carl gets to sit and be almost be a passenger in Ant's car, but he's also just as talented of a player, if not more. And so it kind of works out best of both worlds.
Cat, though, is a personality passenger. Like, he's better than a passenger as far as the playing goes.
Yeah, he's a better player. He's a better player than Ant.
But Cat will never be, and this is just him. It's not even really criticism. Cat will never be the heartbeat of a team. Ant is. And I am not making comparisons between these two guys as players, because Ant is, still new, a rookie. But you know what Ant is, personality-wise? He is a reinforcing, positive Jimmy Butler.
Yeah.
Like he runs his mouth. He's a great quote. Butler was, as far as when he talked to us, likable. Like, he was a great quote. I never saw him become a true jerk to us. Ant is a positive Jimmy Butler. Think about this. He talks just as much. He provides just as many great quotes. But what does he do? He talks about everybody, and Jimmy picked his guys, right? Like Tyus. He loved Tyus. I love Tyus. Tyus is the greatest. Never said a bad word. But unfortunately, that reinforcement ended at a certain point with players. I am yet to hear Ant be like, yeah, I had to carry Cat. He's always like, oh, Cat's doing this and Cat's doing that. He almost convinces you.
Last night he was pumping pumping Hernan Gomez's tires last night after the game.
He's like, but tell him to shoot, man. You're costing yourself money when you don't shoot. I love it.
He's Blues Clues Butler. He's just Mr. Positive. We're just talking about basketball. We're just talking about basketball.
That's exactly what he is. But I mean, you think about it, right?
Yep. And so it just feels like since the All-Star break, this whole thing has started to turn a corner that didn't look like it existed. I mean, there was legitimately discussion around the All-Star break of, is Chris Finch going to regret this? Does Gerson Rosas not know what he's doing? Like, how desperate are they right now? Because they had banked on D'Lo and Cat being the pairing, and for a million different reasons, injury largely, and the fact that they haven't played together. But also, I think there's some flaws in their basketball personalities and games too. That like neither D'Lo nor Cat strikes me as the guy that's going to lead your franchise to the promised land personality wise, like we've already determined. And so what they've figured out is how to use some of these pieces in an efficient way. They figured out over the last couple weeks that Anthony Edwards is the driver of this car. And they figured out that Ant and Cat play a great two-man game off of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And yesterday we get the update that D'Lo is back in the practice facility. Pretty soon, he's going to start. We're sort of in that 4 to 6 week window where he's going to start ramping up team activities at some point.
Yep.
And it looks like the goal is to get him back on the court before the season ends in about 7 weeks from now. And this is going to take some potential massaging by Chris Finch. But whatever the Wolves do, and they're going to get Beasley back from his 12-game suspension, whatever the Wolves do when these guys start coming back, everything has to start with Ant and Cat as these are the two guys that we are building this thing around. We're not gonna put Ant back in the back seat of this van here. He's driving and Cat's in the passenger seat. And if they want to switch off in those two seats, that's up to them. Everybody else is sitting behind them. And it's going to be up to Gerson Rosas and Chris Finch. By the way, I looked this up on Basketball Reference. The Wolves' worst two-man lineup combo. Of all the two-man lineup combos they've run all season, the worst two-man lineup combo they have this season is a minus 18 points per 100 possessions, and it's D'Lo and Ant on the court at the same time. So you're going to have to find a way to, if D'Lo is going to play 30 minutes or whatever it is, to me, it can't really eat into Ant's minutes, and you also can't put them on the court a lot at the same time based on that statistic.
Can Chris Finch help with that statistic?
Probably.
Because I will say this. The biggest difference that I can see between Ryan and Chris Finch, for sure, no question, late in games, it's very different.
Yeah.
It's very different. Chris Finch is a coach who has been doing this a long enough time, at least as an assistant, where he makes moves late in games that look obvious and easy. And you're like, of course he does. But we saw an extended period there where Ryan didn't, and it really spirals downwards if you don't. So I'll give Chris Finch credit for this. He looks like he knows exactly what he's doing, that he's got control of things. And I will be very curious now to see when D'Lo and Beasley come back, what the rotations are and how things look, because there is a very different feeling in the switch of coaches now to sort of the tone of this team from that standpoint.
So the Wolves' best 5-man lineup so far this season, among the lineups that have at least played, just going through this, among lineups that have played at least like 30 minutes together, it's Karl Anthony Towns and Jared Vanderbilt up front, and it's Anthony Edwards, Ricky Rubio, and Malik Beasley in the backcourt. So I like that. I think when Beasley comes, I think the question is, well, when Beasley comes back and when D'Lo comes back and Ant has done what he's done, then okay, who starts? Well, this lineup, and I think that this lineup's been good even with Ryan Saunders at coach. So if this lineup's already good and maybe they're not even optimizing it, can this lineup be as good or better with Chris Finch pulling the strings?
Sure.
And then D'Lo comes off the bench for 25, 30 minutes as a scoring punch. That's what I would look to do. That's if we're playing fantasy basketball and we get to pick our own lineups. We're playing NBA Live,
Yeah, but how is the player going to react to that move if he's coming off the bench when he was acquired to be the 1-2 Batman and Robin?
I get it. But don't you think we're kind of at the point here where feelings don't matter? Like, this franchise has been garbage for the better part of 30 years, but since KG left, you got feelings. D'Lo's feelings don't matter. It's sort of bad luck. Yeah, man, the original plan was Ryan was going to be the original coach and you and Kat were going to play together, and all of that has gotten blown up over the last year. Yeah. And so the new plan, the future, which is now, as Chris Finch said last night, it's Ant and Kat. And then we're going to optimize and feed those guys whatever they need for complementary pieces, and everything else sort of takes a back seat. Feelings take a back seat. So now the problem with D'Lo as a sixth man is you're paying him max money to be a superstar, and so obviously you're going to have to rectify that in some form in the future. But the reality is, this is no longer the D'Lo and Cat show; it's the Ant show with Cat, and those two guys have to be serviced first.
I will say this, of the three young players that we talked about, Jefferson with the Vikings, Kaprizov with the Wild, and Ant with the Wolves. In every case, I want those three with their respective teams to be featured players. I have no interest in breaking them in. I have no, they're not cute players who, they're going to be good. No, they're good now.
Yeah.
So in all three of those cases, I want each one of them to have every single opportunity to succeed right now, not in a year. And in Kaprizov's case, that is taking place right now. But that goes back to Jefferson. And can we get him the ball? First 2 games, we didn't get him the ball. Well, that's on you. And you need to fix that. And Ant is the same thing. Do what you have to do with D'Lo. That's absolutely fine. But you're right. This now needs to start with Ant and Carl, and it needs to evolve from there. Because if this is going to be successful, that combination can work, will work. And with Ant, you've got to keep in mind what I think he means to this team, both on and off the court. And at 19, when you will grab the reins and talk up Juancho and Ricky and do what he's done, that cannot be ignored as far as changing the environment of a team that's had a crappy environment now for a long time, including the Tibbs year, because the environment was not good.
Yep. By the way, if you have a broken down phone, tablet, or laptop, or a max contract point guard that's broken down, any of those things,
what can I do with that?
Well, I don't know what you can do about the broken down max contract point guard, but those other things, Wamatech can help you out, because Wamatech is a trusted supplier of pre-owned cell phones, tablets, and laptops. They are a local company based in Minnesota, and they source pre-owned devices directly and pass the savings on to you guys. They'll even buy your old device for cash. Find out more at wamatech.com. That's WAMATEK.com. Real quick, Judley, how bad is the Matt Dumba injury from last night?
Doesn't look good. He went into the board skate first. He somehow jammed, it looked like his right ankle / leg, and he could not put in any weight on that right leg going off the ice. So I'm guessing he's out for a while. What we saw last night in Colorado is this. If the Avs are bound and determined to say, you know what, we're going to put our foot to we're going to put the gas pedal to the floor tonight, they are superior to you right now. It does not mean that the Wild is bad. They played a terrible game, but that, I think last night was more about the Avs and the fact that they're a team that was favored by a lot of people going into the season, Phil, to win the Stanley Cup. And they've had sort of an erratic start to the season, and they had a lot of guys hurt. Those guys are starting to come back. But look, when you have, starting with that Nathan McKinnon line and Landeskog and Rantanen, you are the better team. And they showed that last night, and they skated circles around our boys, which is also the reason why Bill Guerin should not, and I don't think he will, mortgage any of the future at the April 10th trade deadline this year, because you're not there yet. Like last night just showed that. It doesn't mean that you're not on the right trajectory, and it does not mean that you are a bad team, but the Avs are potentially, when they want to be a great team. And last night they were basically started that game saying, man, your 5-game win streak is really, really cute. That's really great. Now let's drop the puck.
Not
and
yet.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I think so. You and I were initially we were gonna do sort of a how aggressive should the Wild be at the trade deadline in 3 or 4 weeks, but let's wait till Dex comes back and let's digest the weekend and let's do a deep dive into that early next week, because last night's one of those games where I don't think, especially in hockey, baseball too, like you should never base your trade deadline decisions off of one game. But last night might have been a little bit of a reality check in that, okay, maybe when you start to size up line versus line against some of the better teams in the NHL, maybe this team is like a year further away than you thought, and maybe it makes more sense to explore the free agency market or off-season markets as opposed to like overpaying at the deadline,
exactly,
for something.
Exactly right.
Yeah, so we'll do a dive into that next week. But that's a wrap on today's episode of Mackey and Judd. Romcom Rewind will be back next week.
We're sorry.
Those of you, I know that it's funny, we are tongue in cheek, but Action Movie Rewind and Romcom Rewind, legitimately some of our most fun shows, and the response from you guys has been great too. Don't forget to click the subscribe button on our YouTube pages, SKOR North MN and Purple Daily Podcast. We just cleared the 17,000 subscriber mark combined between the two channels yesterday. So boom, huge thank you. And by the way, AJ Fredrickson, I know you've been grinding behind the scenes here while we spew takes about Ant Edwards, but he's been filling in for Declan all week on Mackey and Judd. They're calling him the fake Declan in the YouTube comments, but he's done an awesome job. He's
done a great job.
I think I'm Declan if there was like a freshman 50 that didn't go away.
That's, you know what, you are a normal Declan. I'd say you're more the norm than Declan is.
Normal guy Declan. Oh,
well, I mean, look, he like most people do gain weight.
Yeah,
I mean, Declan's
I'm
got
just ahead of the curve.
Well, you know what? I am not casting stones, AJ. I am not here to cast stones or pass judgment on you.
Yeah, no, Declan's he's a big Corona Seltzer guy. I am going to go with the cheap beer out of the fridge.
You know, Phil. You know what I just thought of, Phil? Is AJ possibly Ant and Declan D'Lo?
Wow,
like a to be made here.
I mean, I think we're gonna need one more game just to see, but boy, AJ's bringing the and ones like Ant was last night. So yeah, all right. So for Judd, for Phil, and for freshman 50 Declan / AJ, thanks for hanging out with us here on Mackey and Judd. We'll see you guys next.